The year 1945 marked the end of global conflict. But for Indochina, with Japan's surrender, a power vacuum emerged, ending decades of colonial and wartime occupation.
From the shadows, Ho Chi Minh, leader of the Viet Minh, returned to a Vietnam ripe for self-determination.
On September 2, 1945, in Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh declared Vietnam's independence, establishing the Democratic Republic of Vietnam.
But the dream of independence faced the heavy legacy of French colonialism, determined to reassert its influence. In the South, British forces, tasked with disarming the Japanese, facilitated the return of French troops.
The Chinese nationalists occupied the North, a complex geopolitical dance unfolding across the nation.
General Leclerc arrived in Saigon, openly declaring France's intention to restore order and control. By October 1945, French forces, with British support, had swiftly re-established control over Saigon. However, this control was met with immediate, fierce resistance from Viet Minh and other nationalist groups in the south. The Viet Minh employed guerrilla tactics, disrupting French supply lines and striking unexpectedly. French forces responded with patrols and sweeps, attempting to pacify the countryside, but often met empty villages. Beyond the battlefield, political maneuvering intensified, with both sides seeking international recognition and support.
In 1946, Ho Chi Minh traveled to France for negotiations, hoping to achieve a peaceful resolution.
The Ho Chi Minh Agreement of March 1946 recognized Vietnam as a free state within the French Union. However, interpretations of free state and French Union differed wildly, sowing seeds of future conflict. Despite the agreement, France continued to reinforce its military presence, especially in the south. Simultaneously, the Viet Minh consolidated their control in the north, preparing for any eventuality.
Later that year, the Fontainebleau Conference failed to resolve fundamental disagreements, pushing both sides closer to confrontation.
By autumn 1946, diplomatic channels were exhausted, and the path to peace seemed irrevocably closed. Throughout Vietnam, tensions mounted, with sporadic clashes foreshadowing a larger conflict. A critical flashpoint arose over control of customs in Haiphong, a vital northern port city.
On November 20, 1946, a customs dispute escalated into open armed conflict in Haiphong.
Viet Minh forces fiercely resisted French attempts to assert control over the port. The French then deployed their naval superiority, threatening to bombard Haiphong. An ultimatum was issued. Viet Minh must withdraw or face severe consequences.
When the ultimatum expired, French warships opened fire, shelling the city of Haiphong indiscriminately. The bombardment caused immense destruction and resulted in thousands of civilian casualties.
Faced with overwhelming firepower, the Viet Minh reluctantly withdrew from Haiphong.
The brutality in Haiphong sent shockwaves across Vietnam, especially in Hanoi, where tensions became unbearable. French commanders issued fresh demands for the Viet Minh to disarm and surrender key positions in Hanoi.
The Viet Minh leadership faced a grave decision: resist and face war, or yield to French demands. Recognizing the inevitability of conflict, the Viet Minh began to prepare Hanoi for urban warfare. French forces, too, braced for a full-scale confrontation, reinforcing their positions. As December 19, 1946 dawned, the final hours of fragile peace ticked away.
At 8 p.m., a nationwide resistance order was broadcast, signaling the start of total war. Within hours, Viet Minh forces launched a...
Streets quickly became labyrinthine battlegrounds, chocked with improvised barricades.
French units, though surprised, fiercely defended their positions in key government buildings. The fighting in Hanoi was prolonged and brutal, a grim start to the new war.
As the war intensified, French authorities began evacuating civilians from Hanoi. The Viet Minh's initial strategy focused on draining French resources and drawing them into protracted conflict.
After weeks of fighting, the Viet Minh leadership and forces successfully withdrew to their jungle and mountain bases.
By early 1947, France regained control of major cities, but the countryside remained elusive. The First Indochina War had officially begun, a brutal struggle that would last for nearly a decade. Despite French military superiority, the Viet Minh's resolve remained unbroken. French forces, dependent on vulnerable supply lines, faced constant harassment and ambush.
The war quickly devolved into brutal jungle warfare, favoring the adaptable Viet Minh.
Both sides engaged in psychological warfare, aiming to win the hearts and minds of the Vietnamese population.
Crucial to the Viet Minh's survival was the widespread support of the rural populace.
To counter the Viet Minh, the French built a network of fortified outposts across the countryside. But the Viet Minh proved adept at infiltrating even the most secure French positions. The war settled into a brutal war of attrition, slowly draining both sides. Initially, the world largely looked away, preoccupied with post-war reconstruction. Back in France, public opinion slowly began to question the costly colonial war.
For the Viet Minh, every setback fueled a deeper resolve for independence. France, however, possessed a significant technological and industrial advantage.
The early years of the war highlighted the immense disparity in firepower and resources. The Viet Minh relied on ingenious human-powered logistics, often using bicycles to move supplies. French air power provided a crucial advantage, targeting Viet Minh strongholds and supply routes. To counter air raids and ground assaults, the Viet Minh developed extensive tunnel networks. French forces often conducted search and destroy missions, but found little success. Political instability in France itself hampered a consistent war strategy. Ho Chi Minh's unwavering leadership provided a unifying force for the Vietnamese resistance. The Viet Minh's proximity to the Chinese border became a crucial strategic asset.
While not immediate, future Chinese communist support would prove pivotal for the Viet Minh.
The elusive enemy and difficult terrain slowly began to wear down French morale. The brutal monsoon season further hampered French operations, making movement treacherous. But the Viet Minh, accustomed to the climate, used it to their advantage, launching surprise attacks. Disease, particularly malaria, decimated French ranks far more effectively than bullets.
By late 1947, the war had settled into a grim, protracted stalemate.
France sought a third way, attempting to cultivate a non-communist Vietnamese government. This effort led to the return of former Emperor Bao Dai, backed by the French. However, Bao Dai's government largely lacked popular legitimacy, seen as a French puppet. The Viet Minh capitalized on this,
portraying themselves as the true champions of national liberation.
The war, initially concentrated, gradually spread its destructive reach across the entire Indochinese peninsula. Various French military commanders rotated through, each attempting to find a winning strategy.
On the Viet Minh side, General Vo Nguyen Giap emerged as a brilliant military strategist.
The communist victory in China in 1949 fundamentally shifted the geopolitical landscape. This opened a vital new supply route, providing the Viet Minh with crucial military aid.
With Chinese assistance, the Viet Minh transformed from a guerrilla force into a formidable conventional army.
Faced with a stronger adversary, France further escalated its military efforts. The rise of communism in Asia sparked growing American concerns about a domino effect. Consequently, the United States began providing significant financial and military aid to France.
The Indochina conflict became inextricably linked to the broader ideological struggle of the Cold War.
With new resources, the Viet Minh launched large-scale offensives against French positions.
Many French outposts were overrun, leading to costly retreats and mounting casualties.
The Viet Minh focused on clearing the French from the border regions, securing their supply lines.
The disastrous French defeat on Route Colonial 4 in 1950 was a pivotal moment.
This defeat shattered French morale and highlighted the Viet Minh's growing capabilities.
General Jean de Lattre de Tassigny arrived, bringing renewed determination and leadership to the French effort. De Lattre implemented a formidable defensive line around the Red River Delta to protect vital areas.
Giap's forces launched costly attacks against the fortified line, but were often repelled.
For a period, de Lattre's leadership brought limited French successes and stabilized the front. Tragically, de Lattre fell ill and departed, dying shortly thereafter, a major blow to French morale. After de Lattre's departure, the war inevitably reverted to a draining war of attrition.
Back home, French public and political wariness with the costly war grew exponentially.
Giap continued to pursue a strategy of protracted warfare, patiently chipping away at French strength.
Frequent changes in French command undermined any consistent long-term strategy.
General Henry Navarre arrived with an ambitious new plan, designed to achieve a decisive victory. Central to the Navarre plan was the establishment of a heavily fortified airbase at Dien Bien Phu.
The French command believed the valley's defenses were impregnable, inviting a decisive battle.
Giap, however, saw an opportunity, devising a brilliant and audacious counterplan.
In an incredible feat of logistics, the Viet Minh secretly hauled heavy artillery into the surrounding mountains. From hidden positions, the Viet Minh completely encircled Dien Bien Phu, unseen by the French.
On March 13, 1954, the Viet Minh opened fire, beginning the decisive Battle of Dien Bien Phu.
Within days, the French airfield was rendered unusable, cutting off vital supplies and reinforcements. The battle devolved into fierce, close-quarters combat for every bunker and trench. The besieged garrison faced a severe humanitarian crisis, with rampant casualties and dwindling medical supplies.
Despite heroic counterattacks, French positions slowly crumbled under relentless pressure. After 56 days of brutal fighting, the final Viet Minh assault began on May 6, 1954.
On May 7, 1954, Dien Bien Phu fell,
marking a catastrophic defeat for France.
The fall of Dien Bien Phu directly led to the Geneva Accords, signed in July 1954.
The Accords temporarily divided Vietnam at the 17th parallel, awaiting reunification elections.
But the failure of reunification would sow the seed